All right, our next speaker, Abburi, is the CEO of the Fast Future Executive, speaker, educator, and author. He's a member of the Forbes HR Council and the Fast Company Executive Board. He is also faculty on the Fast Future Executive. Please welcome Hari.
Good evening. So I know I'm a couple of sessions away from your cocktails, but I certainly tell you I put in a lot of effort. I call my presentation an Instagrammable presentation. So please have your cameras ready. The argument I would put out to you at the beginning is that in an AI native world, we need ideas-obsessed leaders who create ideas-obsessed enterprises. And why do I say that? We have seen the story of digital play out. Organizationally, we have seen efficiencies kick in, but on the customer side, the throughput has been exponential. In many ways, digital hasn't benefited employees as much as it has benefited customers. And let me explain. On the organizational side, this entire customer centricity or in pursuit of the customer, the speed of the customer, is all about, it drove an echo chamber of single industry thinking. Toys R Us, Bed Bath & Beyond, GE before they reinvented into the three entities, and the list goes on and on. On the other side, the problem with customer centricity was it was faster, better, and cheaper, but not necessarily more innovative. So the question I asked myself when I started writing the book and a bit of the research around it is it possible that a customer-centric company is actually not innovative? Because we have been really drilled into our head that customer centricity is the holy grail of the digital era. To answer this, I took a few examples. And one of the examples I took is that of touchscreens. It took 44 years for touchscreens to jump from an industrial purpose, lab purpose use to your refrigerators in your house. The question is, why did that happen? But if this was the speed of the centricity of the customer, and that created productivity focus, that created a single industry echo chamber, you may ask, but I understand that, but what does the speed of an idea look like? And I explain this in a very simple way. If you look at the aerodynamics of Kingfisher bird that helped build bullet trains, the memory foam that has come from the space shuttle, the glue that has created Post-its, the glue in the ammunition that has created the famous Scotch tape that we cannot live without, all of these ideas and multi-billion-dollar products did not come from their industry. Neither did they come from the single application as we understood it. But then I found another interesting dynamic to this. We understand disruption, but that is much slower. What was much faster is reverse disruption. In a similar way that I showed you the touchscreen example of 44 years, when you look at the reason why humans evolved to who we are is we are perennially in search of something. We were in search of land, we are in search of food, we are in search of companionship, we are in search of whatever we were looking for. And that search as a business model became Google many, many years later. But when you look at it, over the years, the transition. What do you do with your voice assistants? You're searching for information. What are you doing with all your AI bots? You're searching for information and synthesizing it. But what happens is once you hit an inflection point, which was ChatGPT in January 2024, suddenly everything that you thought was disruption looked really obsolete. Alexa looks like the dumbest machine on the planet because it cannot do anything other than turning a light off and turning a light off. It cannot understand that it doesn't even tell you may want to carry your umbrella today because at 2 p.m. It's going to rain. The level of intelligence was so stark as compared to every other device we used when Gen AI came into play. Now, why does this happen? And I call this the transfer of expectations. In the minds of your customers, there are no industry boundaries. Every single leader in every single company has spent so many $1 million in research of nothing, because they do not really live in the shoes of the customer because you're looking at the application, you're not looking at the mind of the customer. And therefore, that lack of boundaryless is what actually creates that level of disruption. And I'll break it down into a little more easier construct to compare it with. On the vertical axis are all the influences that you have existing in your company, your product and services, your enterprise, your ecosystem. It's all about the love of what you do. You fall in love with what you're doing so deeply and passionately. By the way, Kodak. On the horizontal axis is all the influences that you should be paying attention to, because that's where disruption is coming from. By the way, Fujifilms. And the reason I give this example is in the year Kodak went bankrupt, 49% of Fujifilms revenue in 2019 came from over-the-counter, pharmaceutical, chemicals, and other products. So that level of disruptive thinking is what this balance is. But I found a very interesting, what I call as the agility factor between this entire balance between these two dimensions. It was not important if your company was on one or the other dimension. That is actually quite irrelevant. What is important is how fast they can move between those dimensions to really quickly get market share, win, innovate, or get technology in place. That ability to shift back and forth between the vertical and the horizontal axis, your passion for who you are versus where the disruption is coming from, is where that agility factor came in from. Example, Glitch. Those of you know Glitch. The software engineers in Glitch created a collaboration tool just to make collaboration among developers easier. That product is called Slack. Okay, so collaboration as a tool did not come from the biggest HR technology firm in the world. It came from solving a fundamental problem, but very quickly adapting it to different situations. All of you know Perplexity. You know Perplexity released an AI-based browser called Comet with very intelligent assistant as they claim it. Perplexity is going through the same process of pain, frustration, and discovery as every other company, but they seem to be doing it faster. They started with basic Gen AI tool, works very well. They call it Wrapper because you can use any other model in it. Then they fell in love with it so much, they started building APIs and other features around it that the customers necessarily didn't want. Then they suddenly realized that as a company, they became too internally focused. They know to disrupt search, they have to actually occupy a different space with agentic AI. That's when Comet comes in. But then they realize it's great to have a agentic AI browser, but you cannot do anything with it because you cannot compete with Google's Chrome. So they make the browser and the agentic AI look like Chrome, right? So obviously, therefore, it's poor in design, but still you see the company oscillating between these two verticals very rapidly. But then what is interesting is what happens when companies try to balance these two equations. This is where it gets really funny. You enter into the hall of irrelevant fame. And many companies today are extremely proud to be in that hall of irrelevant fame because they can neither bounce between the two verticals and make those choices and decisions and bold bets to innovate and break through from where they are as a company. So companies that think on the edges, as I call it, do one thing distinctively very different. They build capabilities that are simply not natural to them. 3 quick examples, but a first quick explainer. What do I mean by unnatural capabilities? I have an ambition for tomorrow that I want to be as a firm. I do not have skills that I need to accomplish that ambition. That is unnatural to it. All the change management story that we hear in companies boils down to a very simple equation. We have an ambition that we want to do. I do not have the skills for it. We pass it off as culture. But essentially, these companies that are disrupting and are playing the edges very well build those unnatural capabilities really fast. Jab, Luxembourg-based company, they own Peet's Coffee and many other chains, goes into pet insurance, pet clinics, now into insurance for people. Nike, they built Nike Land on Roblox. They get 6 million visitors a year. If you combine all the Nike retail stores, it won't be a fraction of the volume they get on Roblox with the gaming and every other experience they built in. Then you have Microsoft. And the reason I use Microsoft is Just because you're a technology company doesn't mean that AI is a natural adoption curve for you. And that is the reason they needed OpenAI. All of these firms have billions of dollars invested already in AI with deep capabilities. So for Microsoft, Gen AI was an unnatural capability. The way they chose to win it is through a partnership route. So if your company can identify what is that unnatural capability that you need to build while oscillating between the two horizontal and vertical influences, you win. Interesting example, Starbucks. I know if you mentioned Starbucks. Starbucks was known for great in-store third place experience. Not office, not home, you hang around. But guess what today? That very foundation of third place culture that Starbucks became a global enterprise is actually their unnatural capability that they're trying to build. How ironic, right? Now they want to change the tables. They're telling baristas, hey, you need to greet people now. They're actually telling baristas, you got to go back to misspelling names of customers so you create engagement. So what you think is your natural capability goes into obsolescence very, very quickly. So companies think on the edges, not only build unnatural capabilities, but they do one thing much better than others. If you look at their annual reports, if you look at their conversations that leaders have on analyst calls, they speak of purpose more than culture. And it's very, very important. This is an underlying theme that I found in every single disrupting company. Using culture is like trying to drive your car with your rear view mirror. When you say culture, it already happened. Purpose is future. So every time a company says culture, you must simply say, okay, they're talking past tense already, right? So, and we have seen this over and over and again play out. So what in effect happens is the horizontal axis is the imperative for the company to override their existing culture. And companies that can do it are the ones that excel. In the list of 1,228 companies I did research on for the book, only 10% of them were in that pocket. Most of them, 70% of the companies were in this great hall of Smithsonian irrelevant fame, and everybody else was dying every 5 years. And there is the reason why I talk about saying companies often talk about culture, but they don't talk about purpose because it's extremely difficult to override it. Now, in conclusion, you may say, Hari, fine, what happens when a company is not at the speed of an idea? And I'll close this with very scary four boxer that I have. Hopefully that will shake up everybody into some action in different companies. If you are very poor at design in the top right quadrant, and if your customers have very clunky experience with you, you lose margins. On the top left quadrant, if your managers make things more complex and your organization processes are bureaucratic, you lose speed to the market. In the bottom right quadrant, if your data is fragmented and your technology is too slow to catch up, you lose the future. And in the bottom left quadrant, when your leadership team is risk averse and your culture prevents us from executing with speed, you lose growth. So if you are a customer-centric company, most likely or not, you're already into one of the four boxes. And the way to escape through the tap is to think on the edges to be at the speed of the customer. And I've often repeated this over and over again. Unimaginative leaders are the greatest threat to the future of your enterprise. And that is the argument that I have to shift the thinking from being at the speed of the customer to the speed of the idea. Thank you.